I'd imagine everybody around here has been around someone who was dying. Maybe your parents or grandparents or friends. Most of us have relatively limited experience being around people who were dying, relatively few people. As a minister, though, I guess I've been around a lot more dying people than most other people. I've seen death play out in a number of situations, and so issues surrounding death, I guess, stick out to me more than most people just because I've been involved in it so much. And there are some things I have seen as I have had experiences being around dying people that have really made me stop and question the way things are. Now, one of those things is something I'd like for us to talk about today. It is something that, at least at this moment, you cannot do in North Carolina, but you can do it in a lot of other states. And it's something that, with all the other stuff that's been going on the past year or so, is not currently being talked about a lot, but it is a movement, so to speak, and it is something that will eventually become legal in many more places. And it is the issue of physician-assisted suicide. Now, I know this might seem strange to talk about, but you know, when you're a pastor and you deal with people with their problems in old age, and you deal with the people in their problems when they end up at their deathbeds and stuff, you begin to realize the importance of advanced planning. And you begin to realize, we have seen so many situations that Juan and I have seen and been involved in where people did not plan. And then nobody ever thinks anything's going to happen to them. And then one day they end up in the hospital. And they've never planned anything, and it creates problems. And so I am a big proponent of advanced planning. And this is something that I think we all need to talk about. This is currently legal in 9 states plus the District of Columbia. In the state of Montana, the state Supreme Court has said that there is no law prohibiting it, and so it's legal without being legal because of a law. Now, it's currently illegal in all 50 states for a doctor to actually do something to kill a patient, but it is not illegal in these states for a doctor to give you something that will help you kill yourself. Now, these various state laws are all very similar. A person must have at least no more than 6 months left to live because of a terminal illness, and you must get 2 different doctors to certify that you have a terminal illness, less than 6 months to live, and that you are doing this voluntarily, and that you are mentally competent. And there are waiting periods involved in this process, so you just can't be having a bad day and go to the doctor and get a prescription to kill yourself. But then if you meet all these criteria, the doctor will give you a prescription which you can go have filled and which you can take it and it will cure you. Now, polls indicate that depending on how this question is asked, somewhere from 1/2 to 2/3 of Americans support the idea of physician-assisted suicide, and oddly enough, this is not a partisan issue. An approximately equal number of Democrats and Republicans alike support the idea. So it's one of the few things, I guess, in the United States that is not a partisan issue. Now, as I said, this is not currently legal in North Carolina, but in a few years, who knows? It has been legal throughout Canada for several years now, and the Canadian Parliament never passed a law or anything. It's just that the Canadian Supreme Court decided one day that this was a constitutional right. And their Supreme Court held that a person does not have to be dying in order to request it. And it's not only that a doctor can give you a prescription that you can take yourself. In Canada, a doctor can give you a shot, a lethal injection that will kill you, much like we do take a dog or a cat to the vet to have it put down. And keep in mind, this was not legislated into law in Canada. It was decided by the Canadian Supreme Court, and it's not unthinkable that our own Supreme Court might decide the same thing. And for that reason, we need to look at this issue from a Christian point of view. Now first I want us to think of suicide in general. There is no direct prohibition of suicide in the Bible. There are a few suicides mentioned in the Bible, but they are not commented on. They are just reported as happening. We heard two of them in our reading from 1 Samuel, where Saul and his armor bearer both fell on their swords and committed suicide. And if you notice that, those were not commented on. They're just reported. And so the Bible contains no outright prohibition of suicide, and it never comments when someone commits suicide. It just reports that they did it. Now, there is a prohibition against murder in the Bible, and some people say suicide is murder. In fact, the German word for suicide is literally self-murder. That's the German word for suicide. Now, other people disagree, though, that suicide is murder. So let's think about murder. What is murder? A general definition of murder is killing a person without justification. If you kill with justification, then it's not murder. Examples of justification would be like in a war, or if someone is perceived as a threat. Now, the United States government occasionally sends drones or something to kill people in other countries, and the justification used is that these people were threats to us in some way, and so they say that's not murder. As another example, if someone breaks into your house, you may be able to shoot them and it be considered justified, depending, of course, on who it is. Now, that's our idea of justified killing, that is, killings that are not murder. But our idea may not be what the Bible means when it prohibits murder. So what exactly does the Bible mean when it prohibits murder? We don't know. And not only do we not know, we have no way of ever finding out. We can never know the exact parameters of what the Bible means when it talks about murder. We might assume the Bible means the same thing with murder as we think of it today, but who knows? After all, even today, people can't agree on which killings are justified and which are not. That's made very plain every time the police shoot certain people. So there's no way we can know exactly what the Bible means when it talks about murder. Does the Bible consider suicide murder? We don't know, and we can never know. This is one of the times when we cannot go to the Bible and find a definitive answer. Now, aside from the question of whether suicide is actually self-murder, there are other gray areas specifically associated with physician-assisted suicide. It's different than just plain suicide. At least at this time, you can't just be going through a rough time in your life and get depressed and go to the doctor for a bottle of pills that'll kill you. The current laws are very specific that you must have a terminal illness and must have a short time to live. Now, this makes it quite a bit different than just regular suicide. Even if we took the position that regular suicide is self-murder, physician-assisted suicide is something that people only do when they're dying anyway. And that makes it a little bit different situation. Now, another gray area in the definition of exactly what constitutes suicide is exactly what constitutes suicide in the context of a terminal illness. Now, we have had 2 participants here at the Chapel of Christ die of cancer who refused chemotherapy. Now, both were told that their cancer was incurable, and even with the chemotherapy, they would only live a short time. Both started the chemo and then stopped it. One stopped it after only 1 treatment. The other had multiple treatments and then stopped it. Now, when each stopped it, each was told by their medical providers that they were, in effect, committing suicide. And by the way, one of those people lived 9 months longer without the chemo. She lived 9 months longer without taking the chemo than she was told she would live with it. So who knows? But it was the other person, the situation that really got to me. This guy was dealing with awful side effects from the chemo and decided it wasn't worth it, and he stopped it. And then the oncologist office started calling him. Why don't you want to live? Why do you want to die? Why do you want to commit suicide? We can make you live. They called over and over and over again. And it finally got to the point where his wife had to threaten legal action if they didn't quit calling. So is it suicide to refuse things like chemotherapy? Is it suicide only when you actively do something to kill yourself? Or is it also suicide when you refuse whatever medical treatments they want you to have? And so you can see there are a lot of gray areas in this physician-assisted suicide today. And we cannot go to the Bible and find an easy, explicit answer. But does this mean Christianity has nothing to say about it? No, it doesn't. Let's look at the studies that have been done on people who have requested physician-assisted suicide. One study reported that people who requested this did it for the following major reasons. They felt bad and they were always uncomfortable. They had loss of bodily function. They had pain and side effects from pain medication. Loss of a sense of self. Fears about the future quality of life. Fears about how they will die. Another study found basically the same thing. Interestingly, this study also found that lack of social or family support, depression, and financial worries are not major factors in requesting physician-assisted suicide. People generally do not request it because their family doesn't support them, because no one visits them, because they ran out of money, or because they lack access to services. So here's why they request it. They know they're going to die shortly, and they feel awful. Maybe they can't get out of bed. Maybe they can't get up and go to the bathroom. Maybe they can't eat by themselves. Maybe they can't even turn over in bed. Maybe they are so tired of being in pain. Maybe they're so tired of suffering from the side effects of the medication. Maybe they feel like just a blob to which things are being done that they cannot control. And maybe they fear dying a lingering, extended death. These people fall generally in the category of people who have been diagnosed with an incurable disease, but not a disease that is untreatable. It is a disease that cannot be cured, but it is a disease for which doctors can do something. Now, we live in a society that developed a medical system with the mantra that people should not die. I guess you could say that is one of the main philosophies behind our medical system, that people should not die. And so our medical system has developed all sorts of ways to intervene in illnesses that cause death. Naturally, each one of us wants to live as long as possible. We all do, and that's just natural. And we turn to the medical system to make that happen. And so our medical system operates to sustain life and postpone death. And death comes today only after everything that was possible has been done. After the entire medical arsenal has been brought to bear, only then is death allowed to occur. But this philosophy behind our medical system leads to disturbing situations. When our main goal is to extend life, and when we do not stop trying until the entire medical arsenal has been exhausted, you are almost guaranteed to have an extended death. There is no such thing as a quick death for people who accept the arsenal of medical possibilities. When you accept all that, you are almost guaranteed a lingering, slow, gradual death. The people who request physician-assisted suicide have by and large had their lives extended by medical treatments that did prolong their lives, but the combination of the disease and or the treatments left them not able to really live. We have developed numerous medical treatments that alter the course of diseases and sustain people's lives with the disease, but they do not cure the disease. They, in effect, give more time to live with the disease. And that more time to live with the disease often comes with severe side effects. People face the problem then of how to live, not only with what the disease has done to them, but with what all the surgeries and treatments and drugs have also done to them. They're alive, but they're alive in some kind of suspended state, sort of halfway between life and death. They know things are just going to get worse, and they know they're going to die an extended, lingering death. They've been given more time to live, but it's not life as they used to know it. They can't live, but neither can they die. You see, it's popular today for people to make living wills because they don't want a feeding tube or a ventilator. They don't want that stuff because they think that'll just prolong their misery. But in today's medical system, more often than not, it's not ventilators and feeding tubes that prolong misery. It's just simply surgeries, treatments, and drugs. And that is the dark side of medical so-called miracles. It often just extends the dying. Every year, a number of people get diagnosed with a fatal medical condition. The surgeries and treatments and drugs offered by the medical system allow some to be more or less cured and go back to more or less a normal life. For some people, the medical interventions fail and they die. But some people are neither cured nor die. They are debilitated by the effects of the disease plus the effects of the treatments and medical things they've had, and their life is nothing that could be called life in a normal sense. And that's not what they bargained for. When they wanted more time to live, they had no idea it would turn out to be like it did. Those are the people who request physician-assisted suicide by and large. Now, our medical system sells a product for a profit. And the product it sells is hope to people with fatal diseases. Hope for more time to live. Sometimes it works out, but sometimes it doesn't. More time to live may not mean more time to be alive. More time to live may just mean more time dying. And then the problem is no longer looking for the next cure or another treatment. The problem becomes that a person is still alive. And now they have to find some way to live with what's left of them after they have gone through the entire medical arsenal. These people know what they're in for. They're hung up for what seems like an eternity between life and death. They are left to somehow continue living with a multitude of symptoms, weakness, drugs, feeling bad, with a life that bears no resemblance to the life they once knew. As a doctor I know once put it, they're stuck on the medical merry-go-round and they can't get off. But eventually they have enough and want out. But there is no way out for them other than suicide. And in the shape they're in, there's no way they can commit suicide in the usual way. Their only option is to beg someone to help them kill themselves. That's their only way out. Now, some people look at death as that God takes a person when he's ready. I know a lot of people that look at it that way. Even if you believe that. The fact is that with our medical interventions, we have so blurred the line that it is impossible to tell when God is ready to take someone. God may have, in fact, tried to take someone numerous times, and our medical interventions intervene. I have been by the bedside of more than one dying person who said to me, I just wish God would go ahead and take me. And I've also been standing out in the hallway with more than one family member who said, I just wish God would go ahead and take her. And believe me, sometimes it was all I could do to keep from saying, well, he tried. Now, the reason we find nothing about this dilemma in the Bible is that it wasn't a factor back then, obviously. It's something that has come about solely as a result of modern medicine. But there is something Christianity does say to this. Although we cannot say for certain whether the Bible considers suicide as self-murder, we can say for certain that suicide is killing. And we don't find much room for killing in Christianity. Now, that is not to say that killing is always, and every sense of the word, prohibited in Christianity, but it is to say that as Christians we have to take killing very seriously. When we are trying to find an answer to something the Bible does not specifically prohibit, we can do two things. We can look at the long-term effects of it, and we can look to see if anything the Bible says might indirectly support it. So let's think about the long-term effect. If we create a society where our only way out may be go to the doctor to get a pill to kill us, or go to the doctor and be put down like a dog or a cat, will that be good overall or bad overall in the long term? In the long term, would a society like that be good or bad? We'll look at it another way. Modern medicine makes it possible for many people to enjoy more good years than they would have otherwise. But can you take that to such an extent that you reach the point at which the leftovers, that is the people who end up blobs that cannot die, negate the good effects of it? Is there a point at which our quest to live as long as possible has such a human cost that it's unacceptable? Those are questions we have never talked about. Never. And I'll admit the only reason that I've even thought about it myself is that I've seen so many people who were left as blobs that couldn't die. Now let's look at whether we can find anything in the Bible indirectly supporting physician-assisted suicide. Is there anything in the Bible that supports the idea of trying to live as long as possible to such an extent that the consequence of it is that for many people, killing yourself or being killed is the only way out of misery? I cannot think of a thing in the Bible that would support that. I can't think of a thing. Now, we may think this will never be widespread in the United States. We may think the North Carolina legislature would never pass it, and maybe they wouldn't, at least not anytime soon, but they don't have to. Remember how it became accepted in Canada? It was a court decision. And just think of all the things that have changed in our society. Not as a result of our elected representatives passing a law, but as the result of some government official issuing an order or some court issuing a decision. Today in Canada, a little over 1% of all deaths are deaths by doctor. And that, when translated over into the United States, that would be 30,000 per year. Do we really want doctors to kill 30,000 people a year in the United States? I think we all know this is wrong. There's very few things in here that I take a position on like this, but I think we all know this is wrong. I think we all recoil from the very idea about it. And that in and of itself ought to tell us something. The only reason we would even consider accepting it is that we have backed ourselves in a corner with modern medicine. We think we have to accept whatever medical technology can offer us, and then if it leaves us as nothing but a blob laying on a bed somewhere, this is our only way out. That's the only reason we'd accept it. It's because we've backed ourselves into a corner where we think we have no choice. Nobody wants to live in a society like that. We have plunged headlong into doing everything possible to extend life without ever considering the ethical and moral issues it raises. We have gone so far in one direction that if we do now try to stop and think about it, it's like trying to hack our way out of a jungle and start over. But that's what we need to do, unless we want to live in a society where the medical establishment routinely hands out pills to people to kill themselves. Do we really want to live in a world like that? If not, now is the time to think about what we need to do to prevent it, and not wait until some government official issues an order or some court issues a decision and it's a reality, and that's the kind of society we live in, and we look back and we say, how did we let this happen? We know how we let it happen. The road for it is being prepared today. If we do not like where that road is heading, maybe we need to consider the things that led us to go down that road in the first place.